Awesome.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It is Wednesday afternoon. After floor activity, we are picking up work on H506, act relating to the approval of the adoption of the charter of the town of Charlotte. We have our own illustrious ranking member, Representative Shane Waters here, is the sponsor of the bill. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm Shay Waters Evans. I'm on this committee. I do not need to go around the table. Charlotte currently does not have a charter.
Oh,
This is creating a new one. We've had them in the past. Our last one sunsetted years ago. And this current charter was voted on this year on town meeting day via Australian ballot. The purpose of the charter is to exempt, the inspiration for the charter was that last year, was it last year or last biennium? I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago. We passed the Homes Act out of the legislature, one of that's intended to make it easier for people to build housing and other stuff. But in this case, Charlotte does not like one part of it, which is the part that gives select boards or municipal governing bodies the ability to make changes to land use regulations without bringing it to a townwide vote. So the way that it works right now, or worked before now in the past, is that every change to a land use regulation, whether it's something major like allowing a 700 unit apartment building or changing a comma, all of those things had to be voted on by the voters in the town. There would be a big document that they would keep track of, the planning commission or the DRB or select board or whoever was making those changes to the land use regulations. And then, have public meetings, go over all the changes, and then we would vote on them as a town. This part of the Homes Act allows municipal governing bodies to make those changes to land use regulations without having a town vote. In Charlotte, we would like to not do that. We would like to, and by we, I mean the voters that voted on town meeting day. I'll give you the stats in a second. The purpose of the charter generally is to exempt us from that portion of it and say that we are going to continue to bring land use regulation changes to a townwide vote.
okay.
And we have 3,444 registered voters in the town of Charlotte. On Tuesday, town meeting day, it was March 4th, I believe, this year. 33% of the voters voted. That's 1,123 voters. And of that 33%, 694 voters said, yes, we would like to make this charter to change the way we make land use regulations official. And 335 said no. So it was approved by around 67%. That's 67% of the 33%.
Okay. We always like the vote totals.
I know, that's what I was ready for you.
Yeah, checking all the boxes.
It's like I've been here before.
Any questions for the representative before we shift over to council and do a little bit more of an immersive dive? Nope.
You done? Great, thank you.
You are, oh, not off the.
So does this tighten your zoning regulations because of the land use, or does it loosen the regulations?
It does neither, I would say. It preserves the way that we used to approve the land use regulations as opposed to this new law, which I believe took effect in January. Alleged council might know exactly what it was. I think it was January this year. Sorry, Tucker. That it says that they can just make these changes. If they want, in my town, it's a select board. The select board could, if they wanted, say, we're going to take all these comma changes and spelling errors and these little tiny things that don't really matter, and we can change those. But if there's a major thing, then they have the discretion to bring that to a vote if they would like to. But this charter calls for all of those things to be brought to a vote, no matter what kind of change it is. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Charlotte appreciates you.
Please, sir.
Good afternoon, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. You have in front of you H506 as introduced, which proposes to adopt the charter of the town of Charlotte. The brief history is that Charlotte did have a charter for a little while, but it was subject to a sunset, or the appropriate term is a prospective repeal of the charter. And unless the town voted to have the General Assembly remove that repeal and keep the charter intact, it was going to expire and subsequently has expired and been repealed from law. Now the town is proposing a new charter to be formally adopted, and that is what is in front of you in H506. It adds back into Title 24 Appendix, Chapter 110, which is the same chapter that was designated for the town of Charlotte in the past. Section 1 states that the corporate existence of the town shall be retained despite the fact that you are adopting this charter. Section 2 has that explanation of the interaction between general law and the charter, which I have previously noted was codified into general law so that we have the same language that is applicable to all municipal corporations that have a charter. And in the past, some of these sections have been removed so that just the Title 17 provision is what a court would use to refer to the construction of these charters moving forward. So I will note that there are old charters and new charters that have this language. In the past, the General Assembly has tried to remove these sections and just have that one provision in Title 17 to guide construction. Section 3, this is the operative provision, the substantive provision that you heard in Representative Waters Evans' introduction. This guides the routine adoption of land use bylaws. And as the representative pointed out, currently under 24 VSA, section 4442 is in chapter 117. All of the municipal planning bylaws that you can think of, a significant chunk of the regulatory structure underpinning things like Act 50, zoning, probably, right? That section states that a legislative body can routinely adopt bylaws and that become effective 21 days after they are adopted, unless the legislative body on its own affirmatively refers those bylaws for a townwide vote, or 5% of the voters of the municipality petition to have it be sent for a townwide vote. Under the town's proposed charter amendment in section 3, the town would be required to adopt its bylaws solely through a vote of the town by Australian ballot. And this can be done at a special or regular meeting that is warned for that purpose. So this removes that discretionary authority for the legislative body to adopt bylaws that could be sent to a town vote either at the discretion of the legislative body or by petition of voters. It eliminates that discretion. Okay. Section 4, this is a severability, sometimes called severability clause. This is another boilerplate provision that shows up in charters that I will note. There is a general law governing the severability of Vermont statute. It is in Title I. And this is another example of something that the committees in the past have removed from charters just because we already have governing general law that exists for all of the Vermont statutes concerning the severability of provisions. Section 5 governs the amendment of the charter. And this just states that it shall be as provided by Vermont law. So referencing general law generally there. 17 VSA, section 2645, the charter amendment procedure, and of course, constitutional power and ultimate discretion of the General Assembly as to when charters will be amended. Section 3 states that this act shall take effect on passage.
Section 3 is the easiest part to digest. Yes, Rafael?
And I know this is gonna sound silly, but I guess I did not realize that municipalities, by virtue of adopting a charter, could undo something that we require them to do by statute that we just passed.
Yes, sometimes that is the whole point of a charter.
I'm seeing
So
that.
charters are all special law. You know, we've covered this before. You're delegating little pieces of your legislative authority down to a political subdivision of the state and saying, this is your area of control. And it's limited by the territorial jurisdiction of the municipality, but you can grant exemptions to general law. You can grant special powers. You can give them broad legislative authority governing certain topics. If you were to read through the city of Burlington's charter, you might be surprised by some of the scope of authority that is contained just within, for example, section 48, their city council's powers. Here, the town is proposing to require all bylaws that are adopted to be approved by the voters at a special or regular meeting. A deviation from the general procedure set up in 24 VSA section 4442. The best example, most common example of where you've considered exceptions to the general practice would be in the past local option tax provisions in charters, right? The General Assembly had this standard set out where municipalities would qualify to adopt a local option tax based on very specific calculations from the years 1997 to 1999. And towns that did not qualify would propose a charter amendment to get a local option tax as an exception to the rule.
Brett Nugent?
Would you mind reminding us of like how it's working under the Home Act right now? Like, I know.
I wouldn't mind, but I still won't venture into that territory, at least not right now, because it's not my area of expertise. There are multiple attorneys who handle that area. And before offering any off the top of my head testimony, outside of the one section that you're dealing with here, I'd rather consider specific questions and come back with specific testimony.
Yes, Reverend, you're gonna steal my thoughts.
It's not really pertaining to the charter. Is it a common practice for charters to sunset?
Oh, no, I thought you were going somewhere else. Right, go.
No.
Because I feel like the charters that we've seen in the past 5 years or so that I've been here, I've never seen a charter sunset.
It's not common. And the reason is that typically a charter is asking for some sort of scope of delegated authority. So say usually the municipal corporation wants that to be an enduring power, right?
I have some insight offer on that if you're curious
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
Please.
So we were trying to find a balance between town meeting, which everyone would like to preserve, and having as many people vote as possible on the town budget. So our attempt to do both of those things, both vote on the budget on Australian ballot and have town meeting where there's active voter verbal participation in the gym at school in the town budget, was to say on town meeting day, we're going to discuss the budget. And then because you have to warn the vote on Australian ballot, we warned it was like 45 days or something, and then voted in April officially on the town budget. So we would do all the town meeting stuff except for vote on the budget and then vote in April. people were concerned about reversing that if we wanted to get rid of it. So the compromise was to have a 5-year trial period. Interestingly enough, everyone was gangbusters at first, and then as the years went by, fewer and fewer people participated in that Australian ballot because they thought they had already voted, or they forgot because who votes in April, or a bunch of other stuff. And so when the time came when it expired finally, or when it sunsetted, we could have had the option to renew it, and nobody tried.
Medicinal.
My opinion and my answer to that is that town meeting day should be a legal holiday. It should go back to the traditional town meeting days where everybody in the town gets together and hashes out the budget and talks about it, and it's a paid holiday, national holiday that support you. Schools closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This would be the appropriate committee to introduce that piece of legislation.
Right.
Yeah, because then everybody would participate. Invent the old fashioned pop up, town meeting day.
My question for you, council, is sort of the scope of the request to be able to bypass state statute in this way. Are there other charters that have provisions such as this, or is this a unique?
Not that I'm familiar with, and you're making me regret that I did not finish a project that Representative Jim Harrison gave me 7 years ago, which was to create a spreadsheet that showed every single overlapping provision from all of the charters. And I got exhausted at about.
That sounds like a 2,000 request.
270 rows in that spreadsheet. I called it quits. And government operations had a municipal charter subcommittee.
Hmm.
I think that's a good job for an intern.
Like 7 years ago, he was an upstart, so. Okay,
I'm not familiar with another charter that has this specific provision about requiring municipal votes, specifically third bylaws.
okay. All right. I think that's what we had had some like minor discussions casually about this before we got here anyway, so I feel like there's a base laid of knowledge on this one, so. All right, well, that's a good open with this one. And what do we have for time until our next guests arrive? 3 minutes.
That's a good question.
No, go for it, go for it. We got a little bit of clock here
So
to.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around these charters, so we can't vote on this today. We have to warn that we're gonna vote, or what?
Yeah, it's good practice.
I think our next
Our next.
We
step will
approve this charter, do we have to hear more testimony?
Us, this
Oh, yeah,
committee?
we need to talk about this one.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we'll get the person who introduced the charter, Charlotte, she'll come in or Zoom in and talk about why she introduced it. We'll get probably a member of the DRB or the select board or whoever, possibly somebody who worked on the Homes Act to say why they made this change in the first place.
Correct.
That seems to me like who we would have.
I think that sounds like the very baseline depth of the testimony that we would entertain.
Old school out of it, but like, it's their town thing.
Yeah, but that was really intentional legislation that so many people in the building worked on, House and Senate, that I feel like there was a reason to have this in it that this town would like to undo. So I'd like to know more about that.
Well, I'm not saying that this particular, I was saying when it comes to town charters, who are we allowed to say, no, you can't do that? You know, you guys want to do it.
Because Tucker says we have the authority.
Let's go, Dylan. Don't blame me. Talk to this guy, Dylan. He's got a roll.
I know, that's why I'm gonna wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
We elected to abolish everybody's charter.
I'm just working off Dylan's rules here.
It's not that simple.
Crazy.
All right, well, thank you, council.